I put some of these things together for you because I don't, believe it or not, have all of this information stored in this knowledge bank of mine. However, even though I'm not quite that good yet at moving these things around fast enough for you so I can keep my live videos a little bit shorter, I am actually pretty good at researching things. I hope you like those pictures that I had in the background there for you. So my food pictures there from a local artist here. Heinrich Hertling is the artist here locally, and he's done quite a few things, and he is actually pretty well known. And I happen to have some of his paintings here. And since we're talking about food, I thought I might set this up for my background. Plus, I wanted to change things up a little bit for you. Okay, all right. So anyway, I wanted you to know that I do a lot of research, and on the very last slide here, I have a list of resources that I put together for this presentation that I have for you. So what I wanted to talk about is what is different about food today. All right, and some of the things I want you to think about as we are, let's see here, as we are going through these slides is I want you to think about if you have any idea who produces your food, and if you know anything about that company, the business practices of that company. That's kind of what I'm going to try and be doing for you in this video. Is there's a lot of facts that you come across when you're looking at some of these topics, and but really in presenting this topic, I want to give you a big picture, and the big picture, of course, has to do with your health, because what are we talking about? Let's see here. If you recall, the theme right now is a happy now year, a happy wow year. Why? Because we want you to start thinking about your health now. We don't want to leave our health in the hands of other people. And the more that you see these presentations and the more that I talk, I really hope that you build this kind of trust in yourself and a kind of independence in looking for the information that you need. Remember, I don't have all of this information, but I do collect this information in order for me to help present some of these most important topics, especially as they relate to health. So my business is Healthy Mind, Body, Spirit. But if you recall, we are starting 2022 with this theme, a healthy new you in 2022. So we want you to think about that and start that now if you can. A healthy now year, so it becomes a healthy wow year. So I do have to do research for this, but I do, like I said, like to try and give you a bigger picture. And right now, for the bigger picture, healthy mind, healthy body, healthy spirit, we are focusing on the healthy body right now. Okay, let's move on. All right, I have a quote here from Thomas Jefferson, and this is actually somebody else in some of the research that I was doing brought this up. I don't want you to think that I happen to have Thomas Jefferson quotes that are just, flowing off my tongue. I do not. I wish I did. In my search, I saw some wonderful other quotes besides that I probably will pop up on my LinkedIn, and this is one that I popped up on my LinkedIn today. Don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn, and also thumbs up, give me a like. subscribe, and also please share my videos as well. I try and edit these videos, as you know, to cut them down, and I'm trying to talk a little bit faster so that these videos aren't so long. But let's take a look at this quote so we can move on. The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. And so what is Thomas Jefferson saying? He's saying, how are we preventing disease? In the future, we are not going to be looking at medicine, but instead be looking at our diet in order to take a look at the cause and prevention of disease. Really, we are so far from this, aren't we? And so we were taking a look at this quote in the early 1800s, and we are pretty far from this future of a medicine-free world. And in fact, as we see, we have been, and again, the bigger picture, as we see, we are becoming more and more dependent on technology. We are becoming more and more dependent on science. And it's not actually, no, let me correct that. We are not becoming more and more dependent on science. That's a good thing. But it appears more and more, here, let me get that a little bit bigger there so you can see that. But it appears more and more that we are being led to believe that we should be dependent on and listening to scientists and not bother ourselves with the science. Now, this is really a trend that should be expected, right? We've got things that we cannot explain. We can't explain the mechanism by which we get, I don't have my cell phone right here. Our cell phone, right? I understood the mechanism by which I could talk on the phone when I was growing up, because I saw the cord in the wall that went to the phone, and I knew that cord went to wiring, and I saw the wiring outside, in fact. So even though I didn't understand all the components of electricity and sound and getting this, I didn't understand all of that. I did understand that there was a mechanism by which this occurred. But as we go on, we become more and more comfortable with the idea that mechanisms by which things occur, we are foreign to us, are unknown to us. And the more and more that we think that these will remain unknown to us, let me get this just a little bit more the way I like it. There we go. And as these things become more and more unknown to us, like medicine, and we don't understand why individuals get that TD, right? That I always hear it and then I don't get it when I come online here. But that the twitching that people get from taking antidepressants, we don't understand the mechanism by which this occurs. Well, that shouldn't be acceptable. So what we're going to do today is we're taking a close-up look at what's different about our food, and what we're trying to do is take a look at the bigger picture to see what's going on as far as the manipulation of both knowledge and science as well. Trying to get accurate information regarding what's going on with our food. So I tried to do enough research to help you in that area. All right, let's move on. So, again, some of the questions that I want you to be asking yourself are things like, as you think about this, if you have knowledge about who produces your food and how was your food produced. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, food production. And so one of the things that we have been thinking about or hearing a lot about, and in particular, I want you to also think about the fact that most of this information actually was surfacing and was in hot debate right before the COVID virus. And so when the COVID virus hit, it took much of our attention off of some of this information that was bubbling up more and more from the food industry. So one of the things that was an area of concern, especially prior to the COVID virus, was GMOs, or genetically modified organisms, genetically modified foods. And what does it mean when we say genetically modified? Well, what we are doing is we are changing the DNA of our food or animals. All right, so so changes are being introduced into the DNA, and we have been doing this ever since Gregory Mendel. Was crossbreeding peas, and so we had a better understanding then of our genes and dominant genes, and we had a better understanding of dominant genes. We had and recessive genes, and so we had a better understanding of how we passed on traits. And once we had an understanding of this, then what we wanted to do is manipulate how we might be able to have better traits in certain areas, right? And so this really was actually some of the basis that we have for eugenics, and the idea that we can build, right, superfoods. We can build, and of course, eugenics was about building a super race. So through technology, the idea here is that we are going to be better able to, in the case of GMOs, more specifically, feed the world, so prevent starvation. And so we've got this, and this is a noble cause, right? Of course it is. And so we've got these two sides to the story where we have seen that genetically modified foods can be demonized, right? And we can also see where genetically modified foods can be the exact opposite as well, right? So raised sort of to this altruistic, I don't want to say that. So I don't know, maternalistic, paternalistic kind of position, and actually that's probably a good way to put it, right? So our understanding sometimes of what is going on relative to health changes and things, again, or technology relative to our food, we've got both of these sort of interesting dichotomies that, and neither one of them really are likely 100% the truth, right? So our genetically modified foods is evil, as individuals have said. Well, it does seem like there's a lot of people who do have a lot of passion in feeding third world countries and getting, in particular, one of the things is vitamin A at a level to prevent blindness in infancy, in infants. So they're born blind if they don't have enough vitamin A, for example. And so rice was genetically modified. And so this is one of the very first genetically modified foods in order to see a real benefit to it, right? That genetically modified foods for a great benefit that had come under scrutiny. And the rice is called golden rice, and it's golden because it has beta carotene in it, and beta carotene gives it this golden color. Beta carotene is vitamin A, and vitamin A is helps prevent any kinds of neonatal problems that end up happening, right? That end up occurring because of deficiencies, in particular in vitamins. All right, so, and you can see there in the picture, we can see golden rice next to the white rice there, and even white rice is bleached rice, right? So we have been really modifying our foods for color, for texture, for all kinds of things, right? But now, when we're talking about genetically modified food, probably the reason that it gets more villainized now is because it is attached now to big ag, right? Big agriculture or big business. So I'm going to talk a little bit down the line about this sort of battle between big business, big ag, and the little farmer. And yeah, I think I can go on from there. There was something else I was just thinking about, but sometimes when I get like 3 or 4 thoughts on board, it escapes me. Okay, all right, so a couple other things that I want to talk to you about relative to genetically modified foods. That is, first of all, tobacco was the first, and it was genetically modified to help resist it or become resistant to disease. All right, and so again, when we take a look at modifying foods, we can see that individuals could lose entire crops. And if you listen to those who are in favor of genetically modified foods, you can hear their story about papayas and what they have to say about farmers, papaya farmers were losing their papayas to a virus that gave the external papaya these bumps. And so there's more debate about that, whether or not that made the food inedible, or was it still, it may have been edible, but was it unsaleable, right? They couldn't sell that food because it just wasn't aesthetically pleasing. And so those are all these conditions that kind of go into these GMOs, right? These genetically modified organisms or genetically modified foods in the case of what we're talking about, or tobacco. Tomatoes were also genetically modified early on, and this is in order for them to ripen later. Now, when you think about this, this makes sense as well, right? We might, in the sale of the tomatoes, not want them ripe at first, but in the transportation, eventually ripen, right? Or eventually on the back end, ripen, and then this way they are not overripe by the time they get to their destination. So you can see that there are some benefits in genetically modified foods in this case, but then there's always a middle ground about this. This all sounds really great, except for in order for the tomatoes to ripen, they had to be injected with a compound. I have to read this. Yeah, that just a compound that caused the tomato to ripen. And what ended up happening is that they traded taste. Individuals could tell the difference between genetically modified tomatoes and farmer-grown, organically grown tomatoes. And so this becomes then sort of the another problem, because companies who are genetically modifying foods and other things are suggesting that by changing these genes, they actually, or introducing more of the gene, they actually are not really changing the composition, and in not changing the composition, we shouldn't expect to see great differences, all right? But we are. If we are seeing a great difference in taste, then the genetically modified tomato is not going to sell, right? And that's what they found out, was that they weren't selling because they just didn't have the same taste. All right. Let me look at some of my other notes here too. So what are some of the other crops that have been genetically modified? Well, in 2013, these were the numbers for genetically modified foods, and I saw some more current statistics that put all of these at closer to 90%, but these statistics are also for GM foods that are here in the United States. They have had greater regulation in European countries for genetically modified foods and for other things as well. They have been seeing, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, some real problems with the bee population. And in Germany, they are they are suggesting that it is directly related to genetically modified foods that have neonicotine or neonicotine. Actually, it's not nicotine; it's neonicotine in it. And so this is different, right? This is some there we have got foods that are genetically modified in different ways, right? That are causing lesser or greater problems in the food supply. But the idea here is what's happening is, and you can also look up this concept, which is CRISPR, CRISPR, which is the cutting of the DNA sequence. So this is what they're doing in order to change the DNA sequence, is that they clip it and they get rid of certain genes which inhibit certain genes, right? Or they may also boost certain genes in order to produce more, like in the way of corn. And so individuals or farmers are able to, especially big ag farmers, right, are able to get a greater crop because they are, each stalk produces more corn, and they are able also to plant the corn closer together. They are also sometimes speed up the germination, or the generation from seed to seed, so they can speed up that process. All in all, what they are doing is they are producing a lot more food, and they're producing it in a particular way in order to feed the hungry of the world and to eliminate starvation, which is what really should be incumbent on first world countries to be able to do. It's just questioning whether or not this technology is leading us in a healthier place, and that seems to be problematic. One of the discussions regarding the vitamin A is that through these herbicides and pesticides, individuals may not be able to be getting the same benefit that they originally thought that they would be able to get. One of the problems is that weeds are becoming resistant to the pesticides and herbicides, and when they become resistant to it, then they are not able to produce the crop like they had wanted to produce in order to produce the food they were hoping to produce to alleviate this world level of starvation that we have. So it seems like there's some good intentions, but it seems like there's problems along the way. And as good scientists, are we avoiding problems, or as good scientists, we're not avoiding looking at the problems, but we are being, good science is being undercut by big business and profits. So the GMO crops are 85 in 2013. 85% corn produced in the United States was genetically modified. 91% of soybeans and 88% of cotton, and these are all closer to, on average now, 90%. So corn as well has risen in the amount of corn that is being produced in the United States that has been genetically modified. Now, it's very controversial about the effects of this, but one of the problems. Well, let's continue on. Let me see what else I have here for you. One of the things, we have soy in a lot of products, right? We have soy in a lot of products, and so if you are trying to avoid genetically modified foods, then one of the things that you want to take a look at, and genetically modified, supplements, things that are genetically modified, one of the things that you want to take a look at is you want to take a look at the amount of, you want to take a look at supplements and what's in your supplements. So for example, a supplement that for lecithin, and lecithin helps with lecithin helps with your digestion. It also helps, though, with things like your mind. It also helps with things like for heart conditions and blood pressure and triglycerides as well. So lecithin is a pretty good product. It's an inexpensive product, but it's a soy-based product. Well, here now, if you end up getting your lecithin, which is a soy-based product, on the shelf, you are likely getting genetically modified soy that's in your lecithin. Also, remember that soy is often the base for protein shakes as well. And so, if soy is the base for your protein drink, you want to make sure that your protein drink is not also soy that has been genetically modified as well. If you aren't sure about the ramifications or the consequences of having lots of genetically modified soy in your diet. So if you want to eliminate that, those are some things that you want to think about. When there are genetically modified foods like soy that's processed, there is no indication that and the FDA does not require that we have any labeling that says that that was made from a genetically modified food. So, for example, cornstarch, which is made from corn, which has been processed. If the corn and the cornstarch has been genetically modified, we wouldn't know that, and it wouldn't have to be labeled as genetically modified, nor would we be able to scientifically study the consequences of genetically modified processed food that was made from, for example, corn, soy, or even cotton, for example. Okay, all right, let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to say on that. One of the things that they have termed as relative to genetically modified foods is they call these foods, genetically modified foods, they call them Franken Foods. And so you'll hear this phrase. And the reason why this phrase is a familiar phrase when we're talking about genetically modified foods, Franken Foods, is because it does really distort the foods in ways that turn them into like Frankenstein plants, right? So they're distorted plants. One of the things as far as genetically modified plants or genetically modified foods that we see, for example, are apples. So apples have been genetically modified so that when they are cut open, they do not brown. So now here you see some genetically modified foods simply for aesthetic purposes, right? Just so that they look better. So this is something that we want to think about or consider as well. Is it important for us to genetically modify things just for the sake of aesthetics, for example, without really considering some of the consequences of that genetic modification? I had a picture of an apple here, but I'll probably pop it up in my edited version. And do we really want an apple that, despite the fact that it is completely shriveled, is still white on the inside? I mean, I don't, I think that when, if we have a generation that's growing up with apples never browning, and then to see an apple brown, that might really, grow some young people out. But if we know that that's the natural process and that the process, the natural process has been genetically modified, we might think differently. So again, here what I'm talking about is the mechanism by which things occur. We want to pay attention to that. We don't want to act like it's all hocus pocus or voodoo. If we act like that, then what's going to end up happening is we're not going to know the difference when people are talking science or when they are really talking hocus pocus. And this is when science becomes really filled with a lot of unfortunate misinformation, depending on the motives and what is driving those that technology, right? And very often what's driving technology nowadays is a lot of money in all kinds of areas. We see it here, we see it in food, we see it in medicine, we see it in artificial intelligence, where people aren't considering the ramifications to individuals. They are only considering pushing technology forward with a particular agenda. So things that we really need to think about. All right. The next, well, no, let me say something else here. Let me see, golden rice. There are outcomes, and one of the problems that we're seeing with some of the outcomes that scientists are finding is that the powers that be that are making money want to get their hands in the science, which drives the science in ways that makes it very dependent on outcomes, very dependent on the moneymakers, right? Or very dependent on the scientists. And that's not the way that science is supposed to be done. Our science is not supposed to be dependent on the scientists. It's supposed to be dependent on the science and the scientific method. And so this is one of the bigger pictures that I want you to think about. And that across the board is calling good science into question, which is basically calling scientists into question. And we have seen that lots of treatments, for example, for COVID-19 outside of the vaccine were suppressed. And now we are scrambling for other treatments for individuals who are, for example, getting Omicron, but are not getting such severe symptoms, nevertheless have zero treatment for it. And or a good stay-at-home treatment for it that includes things like vitamin D, for example, and vitamin C. So are we getting, or have we been getting that information, that much-needed information to individuals? That has been really part of this whole suspicion of science and scientists to make sure that they are getting their narrative heard and their agenda pushed, as opposed to what they are supposed to be doing as healthcare professionals, including food providers, because that is such an important part of our healthcare. We should have been able to, and we should be looking at diet and those natural ways that food work with our bodies to help us resist disease. But the more and more that we avoid that, the more and more we become dependent on voodoo science that has one narrative. All right, so one of the things that I found in my research has been that genetically modified corn in mice, they had fewer babies. Half the mothers of genetically modified rats died and or were smaller when they ate genetically modified, so they were rats that ate genetically modified soy. Now, one of the problems with these earlier studies is that they don't have a large sample size. Now, this really is also, again, the bigger picture. This also has been called into question more often when the results don't fit the results that the narrative is looking for. So then they talk about small sample sizes. Well, we statistically account for small sample sizes in order to find out whether or not they still really are statistically significant. And some of these studies do not have statistically significant findings, meaning that the outcomes may be due to chance, not really be due to genetically modified foods like soy and corn, for example. All right? So what we need to do, though, across the board, and what we're finding is the real problem with science is that there aren't independent studies that are being done. And this is really hurting not only the American public's health, the American public's knowledge, and actually the knowledge worldwide, because a lot of our knowledge that we're getting from changes in the virus and also what the vaccine is able to do is from studies that have been done abroad, not studies that have been done here in the United States. And again, what is the reason for that? That's because we are seeing individuals with a lot of money and a lot of power push a narrative. And so we need to be paying attention to what these studies are really saying, and then also who's doing the studies. All right? All right, so let's see here. Hamsters that ate genetically modified soy stopped reproducing. We know that immune responses were showing high levels of toxicity in animals, mice and rats and hamsters that they were looking at when they were given genetically modified corn and when they were given genetically modified soy. We also see a great rise in allergies, and this has also been related to genetically modified soy. That we see an increase, 7-time increase in allergies. And let's see, and also the United Kingdom also saw a 50% increase in allergens after genetically modified foods were introduced. So again, people will tell you these are correlational studies, but so are, and I have said this all along, but so are our findings between the relationship between smoking and lung cancer. And also correlations between the relationship between AIDS and unprotected sex, for example. So we see these correlations, and they actually are very meaningful. And so what we need are more independent studies that are taking a look at some of the differences that we see in the impact of these genetically modified foods. Okay. Now, let's take a little bit of a look. We talked about genetically modified plants. Let's talk a little bit about genetically modified food. Now, we have found that that the FDA has been reluctant to approve genetically modified foods, but we still see that that there are, first of all, our cattle, for example, and our chickens are eating genetically modified foods, right? So they are given feed that has been genetically modified. The soy and corn that they are being fed has been genetically modified. So no matter what, the animals, unless they are not being fed genetically modified foods, the animals that we are eating also have genetically modified tissues, basically, or have processed genetically modified foods. We know that salmons are genetically modified in order to prevent diseases so that they can grow on these large salmon farms. And so what they do is they, first of all, prevent disease, but they also add a growth hormone as well. And then if you look on the packages of salmon, you will see that they say color added. And this is because so what we're seeing basically is that we are giving or genetically modifying salmon in ways that make them resistant to disease, but so therefore resistant to bacteria. And so they're adding color because the color actually produces in the salmon this pigmentation that's related to bacteria. And so we are seeing this salmon that doesn't have the same pink color that's related to the natural bacteria that's in the environment. And so we see these changes in food. We also that's basically, as far as genetically modified foods go, that's basically what I want to say. So we've got genetically modified plants, and then we also have, we are embarking on genetically modified animals. And we are also, there is some dispute out there about what is called, what that we have given animals, so that, which is genetically modified, which is a bovine growth hormone. And What we found out, although they suggest that this does not change the gene structure of the animals, we do find that genetically modified or cows, for example, that were given bovine growth hormone actually aged faster. We are also finding other kinds of outcomes as well, such as issues related to infertility, issues related to accelerated aging, to fatty insulin regulation, to gastrointestinal problems, and also urine problems as well. So, and we see these nationwide related to genetically modified bovine growth hormone. All right, now, of course, what all of this has taken me to is to find out just a little bit more information on how our food has changed relative to what we know about Monsanto's. And so here, what I have is, before I get into that a little bit, I want to take you into some of the, and sort of lead you into this idea about where I got some of my research from. And so these are pictures here that I have of an egg farmer that produced a great number of eggs across the country. And it was DeCoster Egg Farm, and this gentleman's name here that you see, his name is Jack DeCoster. And although I call him a gentleman because I think that that's what I should do, because that shows respect, he did not show respect to his workers at all. This picture is taken of his facility there, on his egg farm. And you can see there in the corner, I have a black and white picture there, which was taken from the video on trafficking that was done by, I'm pretty sure it was PBS. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly, but I will have that for you when I get the edited video. I just don't want to make a mistake and tell you something wrong. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to tell you something wrong. But he had his employees working there for 16-hour work days. What they found was, and eventually he was arrested and his partner was arrested because they found that they had 90 undocumented workers. They were never arrested on charges for trafficking, although they had several minors working there in unbelievable conditions where in trafficking, because trafficking is just not sex trafficking, but it is also trafficking in workers. And so they had workers that were undocumented workers from Guatemala that they were basically abusing, forcing young underaged children, underaged workers to work these long, grueling days in these disease-infested conditions. In 2010, the farm was shut down basically because there was a Salmonella outbreak that was traced back to the DeCoster egg farm, where they effectively recalled it affected over 50,000 individuals. And so that essentially put DeCoster out of business, and he ended up going to jail for trafficking. And so this is just one example of what we are beginning to see with big agriculture and this movement towards a blind eye, as long as we are producing the highly demanded foods that we produce. And now just to talk a little bit about Monsanto. So Monsanto went into business and actually named the business after his wife, and was the first producer of saccharin. and actually didn't become big. So in the late 1800s began business, but actually didn't become big. So struggled for a while and became big in 1919 as the first producer of saccharin here in the United States, and also then put it in Coca-Cola. So that was some pretty big money-making venture as well. They were part of many business acquisitions, including acquisitions that for aspirin. And so here they began to get into the chemical industry. And in 1920, they produced PCB, which was a pesticide that was resistant to both acid and heat. But in order for it to break down, it needed over 200 days of sunlight in order to even begin to break down. We know that in the 1930s, Monsanto did studies on exposure to PCB in rats and found that they had liver damage when they were exposed. But of course, per usual, that information didn't get out and wasn't until the 1970s where PCB was banned. And this was at a time where they were also banning other chemicals. Another pesticide that Monsanto was responsible for was DDT, and you can look up the big long names for these, which was banned which was produced by Monsanto in 1944, but banned less than 30 years later. So the 1970s, they actually did a really big cleanup with some of these chemical companies. We also know Monsanto is actually responsible for LED lights as well, so that so you can see what's going on in the literature is that individuals are ensuring that they are giving equal time and equal representation to the other side. And one of the things that we are finding is that these companies are taking small businesses to court and suing them, and they are losing farms, and they are losing these court cases when they are, for example, being accused of spreading, according to Monsanto, misinformation about their product. You will find that their glyphosate, which is in their Roundup, so this is what they were most noted for, was what they called a biodegradable, I believe it was a herbicide, that it's a herbicide, and I have to get that right, so I'll have that in the edited version. But they said that it was biodegradable, and in being biodegradable, it wasn't biodegradable. They ended up actually having to take that off of their labels. And so there have been a lot of scientists that have been looking at the claims of, for example, what they have made claims as far as Roundup and their prevention of weeds when we found out that the weeds became resistant to the herbicides. We also have been taking a look at whether or not, again, that there are effects of the genetically modified foods, and also suing farmers who can only use their seed one time. So they have got a very unique copyright on their genetically modified foods. So Monsanto was very big in getting the narrative regarding genetically modified foods being used by the masses, and now being used, and also being able then to dictate the amount of crop that they can produce and whether or not they want that crop to change over, less or more of the crop, by regulating the sale of the seed. All right, so some interesting things there about Monsanto. We know now, we also know that Monsanto, Monsanto's seeds accounted for 85% of the corn here in the United States and 93% of the soybeans sold here in the United States. And so despite a lot of this controversial and negative um, depiction or characterization of Monsanto. They're actually still a very rich company that was bought by Bayer for $66 billion. And there was some controversy about whether or not this merger was going to go through. What we have seen here is we have seen many companies, many chemical companies merging. Let me take you to that slide. Here we see so 4 different mergers of 8 different companies that end up producing these mega corporations in the field of chemical engineering, big in agriculture, and our food, right? So these are 4 companies: Syngenta with ChemChina, Dow with DuPont, Agrium with Potash Corp, and then the final one there, which was more recently approved, was the Bayer-Monsanto merger. And you can see more and more that Bayer is beginning to drop the Monsanto name. And so this is another way that we see that corporations are able to This is also another way that corporations are able to avoid the negative press that comes along with some of these bad choices that they've made, and in particular, then avoiding the consequences of these choices that really have real negative consequences for our health. All right, moving on. Now, this is a picture that I have there, which is from a documentary, and I have the name and the resources there. You can see it's a DW documentary. But they were looking at the effects of what I was telling you was the neonicotine that they are putting in the seeds. So this is different. But Bayer is responsible. So this the documentary is called Bayer and the Bees. It's a DW documentary that you can see. And Germany is the country that is really taking Bayer to task for, and what that man is holding there, that's a handful of dead bees. And so they were demonstrating on the streets in Germany, showing what these genetically modified seeds were doing for the bee population. And what some are suggesting is that bees cannot pollinate using, or bees cannot pollinate GMO plants, they can, or flowers, they can only pollinate non-GMO plants. And this is the reason why they are seeing this, the bee population drop so significantly. And this is some of the reasons why we have heard so much about the bee population. But as you have noticed, you may have noticed, we don't hear a lot about the bee population since COVID virus has come along, right? So let's keep our ears open for what somebody might then turn the narrative to be happening with our bee population. All right, so again, that is genetically modified seeds that were causing that problem, but they did not have the glyphosate in it. They were coated with neonicotine is what it was. And if I have that wrong, I will make sure that I correct that, but I'm pretty sure that I'm saying that right, and I have that right. Okay. And now this is a picture, and you can see the caption there. This is from the movie Mad Cowboy, and also the picture in the corner there is from the trafficking there. And what we see here is a concentrated animal feeding operations. One of the things that we know is that in the I believe it was in the 1980s, although I'm not sure about that. It could have been the 1990s, when Oprah Winfrey was sued by the beef industry. And Oprah Winfrey was actually, she ended up winning the case. However, as outcomes of that case was a lot of real censorship that revolved around our food. So I asked you earlier in this, do you know where your food comes from? Some of you know that I get I'm a big drinker of milk, but I get my dairy milk from a dairy farm locally. And it is non-pasteurized milk that I drink. And there are lots of reasons why I get that, but here's the thing I want to point out. I know where my milk comes from. I can walk in there, and I actually own a cow, right? And so because I do, I can walk in there and I can look at what is taking place, how clean the facilities are, how well they keep their tanks cold and clean and churned, and all of those really important things. So I do know where my milk comes from, and it really concerns me that we can no longer have cameras or journalists in our beef producing, pork producing, chicken producing industries or facilities any longer because of the negative publicity that causes real significant decreases in income for these companies. So here you have got individuals suing somebody as big as Oprah Winfrey because they are able to say that her press, being such a big star that she is, really does jeopardize their livelihood. And so some of this information is being suppressed in order to not give those people who are conducting business in a way that may not be something they want forecasted to the public, obviously, right? So they're conducting business in a way that they want the public to remain ignorant of. And this really has some cause for concern. It doesn't mean that these corporations are doing something sinister or underhanded, but we do know that when individuals do not like the light of day shining on their business, it more than likely has to do with the fact that they have something to hide. And turning the science and turning the camera onto something else simply distracts individuals even more from what might be going on. And that's of real concern. Now let's take a look at gluten. So we've taken a look at GMOs, and we also have taken a look at GMOs in plants. We've taken a look at it in animals, and also taking a look at it really relative to our seeds, more closely with our seeds. Now, gluten is another topic that has kind of recently taken a back seat. We certainly heard a lot more about gluten prior to COVID, and it started to die down a little bit. And one of the reasons why is because there, again, is a lot of murky science there's lots of murky science that's related to gluten, and therefore it seems that individuals are afraid then to speak up about what is true and untrue. So it leaves a lot of room for indecision, right, and inconclusive evidence on it. But what we end up seeing more and more are things like people in the big industries are getting their hands getting their hands in the science, and then leading the science promotions and information in a direction that fits the narrative. And then by suggesting that you may be a journalist that ends up getting sued for putting information out there that can hurt a major industry. This then leads journalists to make sure that they are actually reducing the reporting on these important issues. And that actually was an outcome of the Oprah Winfrey trial, was that journalists were much more reluctant to make known some of these questionable practices by these large corporations. All right, so we see the same kinds of questions that are arising around gluten. And so what we have seen are correlations with gluten and celiac disease, which causes digestive problems in being able to pass your food and having the right nutrients and right organisms in your gut in order to pass your food like you're supposed to process and pass your food. We have also seen individuals there have been a great rise in gluten intolerance. Now, what is gluten? Well, gluten is the stuff that gives bread, for example, that nice kind of gooey, soft texture. So we can see where individuals may have genetically modified wheat in order to get this better texture for bread, right? We also know that individuals have increased their bread intake. And so there's this sort of information vicious cycle that's going on, right? So we have some correlations that are going on between these diseases and the rise in gluten. But then we have objections from producers of wheat producers, who are suggesting that gluten has not been increased in wheat, in particular to the extent that many are claiming. So they are saying that these increases in celiac disease and gluten intolerance doesn't have anything to do with, for example, genetically modifying wheat. Now, that may be true, because what they're claiming is that wheat was not genetically modified prior to or is relatively left unmodified. So that's the question, right? Have we genetically modified wheat considerably in the past in order to make it more palatable for individuals? Or are we seeing these gluten intolerances due to the fact that we have increases in bread consumption, right? So again, what we end up doing is we end up getting murky waters, where then science gets involved, but we have science that is independent, and then that we have scientists that are part of the big corporations. Scientists that are part of the pharmaceuticals, that are objecting to things like, for example, natural immunity, and objecting to the information that was out of the Israel reports on natural immunity. So what are we doing? We're getting pharmaceutical companies that are getting their hands in the science when it is unethical, when there is a question of their interest, right? So a conflict of interest, that's what I was looking for. When there is clearly a conflict of interest. And how is it that our science keeps getting produced from individuals that have a stake in the outcome in our science? That is the reason why individuals don't trust the science, and that simply do not say, yes, I'll trust the science. And oh, by the way, lots of them are scientists, by the way. Very good scientists like me. Okay, now throughout this, I have already been talking about what this slide is basically trying to get across. And that is that we are really looking at farmers who are typically used to working with the land versus technology, which is controlling the land or controlling food. And if you take a look at this, this also started quite a while ago. When we started subsidizing farmers. When we began to subsidize farmers, this is when we were able to get big corporations to then take over farm, or at the very least produce food on this large scale for cheaper prices. And we kept farmers who had non-GMO seeds and more natural ways of producing foods taken more and more out of the picture. And so some of this may have started long ago when we started giving farmers subsidies. By giving farmers subsidies, what did we do? We made them become dependent on a system that was being dictated to go in a particular direction, right? All right, so I've already pretty much talked about that. That's the big picture that I want you to think about, is what's going on. That when we look at technology versus farming, what we are doing is we are manipulating and controlling food, and we are putting our food, which is a basic need that we have, in the hands of individuals who are private businesses that are trying to control our health, basically, in the end, and our health choices as well, by manipulating our food choices. Okay. What are we going to do about it? Well, if you do some research, you're going to be able to find some pretty good organizations that where they have organic and truly organic foods, right? Also, there are also clubs that you can look at going to and getting organic seeds that are guaranteed to be non-GMO seeds. So the things that you want to do is you want to take a look at local organizations that can help inform you about where these resources are and what's going on legislatively regarding our foods, where there are new laws and where there are new narratives being presented. So look for groups that can help you with that. But here are some other ideas that might also help you, because very often, and this is my case, I simply will not end up getting the nutrients I need in food. Some of the people ended up quitting their job and starting farms because their health was so compromised by so many years of bad eating. Well, I don't plan on actually quitting my job to do that, but what I do is I take some really good quality supplements, as you all know. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some of these things that are healthy for us that you can get naturally, and then also talk about, if you are not a person who can get all of these or can afford to get all of these things organically grown from a farmer's market or from a store that sells only farmer's market organically grown food and organically fed animals, then you can be assured that your food is safe. But until then, what I do, because I don't get all of those things, it takes me 40 minutes to get to the nearest store that would have the beef that I would be able to buy. Although I will say that I am starting our healthy cleanse, and remember that our healthy cleanse, starting tomorrow, is, as a guideline, 75% vegetables, 25% fruit. And so if you can keep up with that for 1 week, 7 days, as well as doing the Shaklee 7-day cleanse along with it, because that gives you things like your alfalfa. It gives you things that help you detox for a fatty liver, for example, and also helps you ease digestion with a good probiotic. So all of those wonderful things to help you with your 7-day cleanse, which, remember, I say I do twice a year to keep myself regular, because of all of these things that I'm compromising my system when I eat. Okay, all right, so sorry about that little gassy burp. Okay, so taking a look at these Shaklee products then. So we've got these foods that help increase our immunity naturally, like red peppers, like dark chocolate. I always pick up dark chocolate. You can see that this is JennyCanCook.com is where I got these, but they agreed with a lot of the other literature, and thank you, JennyCanCook.com, for these beautiful pictures that I'm using. Garlic, dark chocolate, oranges, so vitamin C, olive oil, almonds, mushrooms, pickles, salmon, black beans, sweet potatoes, carrots, sardines, spinach, tomatoes. What do I use from Shaklee to help me boost my immunity? I use, first of all, Nutriferon. I have a video out there on Nutriferon. Take a look at it. If you really want immunity boost, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, that's all I can say. One of the things about Shaklee products is this, is that you notice a difference. And that's the reason why when I'm talking about health, you need to be taught, and you want to stay away from what they traditionally try and sell you and tell you, then what you need to do is do the research on your own. I did the research. I'm not asking you to believe me, but I will tell you that you will find hundreds of research studies on this Shaklee, on these Shaklee products. Nutriferon boosts up my immunity in ways that you can see my video, and on the video it tells you what I have exactly seen in my immunity boost. Vitamin D also. Vitamin D in my video, the first in this series, was on the importance of vitamin D. We see that every single comorbidity is also related to deficiencies in vitamin D, including obesity, including old age, including darker skinned individuals, higher levels of sugar in their blood. I think there's one more as well. There is. Vitamin C as well. So I take vitamin C supplements as much as I can take. I love their vitamin C chewables, but they don't give me as much vitamin C as I like. So very often I take their sustained release vitamin C. That gives me 500 milligrams, and it releases slowly throughout the day. You take 3 of those, you have 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C. So that's something else that I look at. And I always take their garlic tablets. Garlic tablets help things like parasitic blood, right? It helps clean your blood. So those are things from Shaklee and things from natural foods that I rely on in order to give me the supplements that I need, in order to give me the nutrition that I need. Okay, all right. So that's for immunity boost. Anti-inflammatory foods. Anti-inflammatory foods include things like flaxseed. And there are also, like, I also get different kinds of seeds. I'll fill in the blank there in just a minute as we come back. What are they? It begins with a C. You guys know what I'm talking about. Green tea, turmeric, cantaloupe, avocado, walnuts, pineapple. They were also talking about genetically modifying pineapple in order to give it more antioxidants. So fortified with antioxidants. Do you want your pineapple fortified with antioxidants? It turns it pink, and individuals were not too keen on pink pineapple, so the genetically modified pineapple really didn't take off. Don't forget, I tell you, lemon water every single morning. Try and have 32 ounces that you carry throughout your day if you can. Berries are great for as an anti-inflammatory. Broccoli, garlic, and kale as well. You can see a lot of green foods help you with as an anti-inflammatory. Now, some of you know that I have really bad knees. A lot of it has to do with my back, but that doesn't matter because when my back irritates my knees get inflamed. And so what do I use for my knees? Well, I always take Nutriferon, which is the immunity booster, along with turmeric, and I have noticed that helps for inflammation for me. I like taking them both together. I really think that they have an impact for me when I take them together. The Nutriferon along with the turmeric. But I also take, and this is new that I've noticed, in preparation for the 7-day cleanse, I've been taking alfalfa. And they recommend that you take 10 alfalfa 3 times a day. That's a lot of alfalfa, and I don't like taking that much, but I did pick up on 10 alfalfa is what I've been trying to do, and I've been doing it, and I've noticed that that clearly has made a difference in my inflammation and going up and down the stairs. So you see the broccoli, you see the kale there, and you see the green tea. You also can get green tea from Shaklee, but I recommend if you want an anti-inflammatory that has a lot of those nutrients in it, I recommend that you get the alfalfa. And again, Shaklee products, the reason why I get them is because I notice. If you don't notice the difference, you get 100% money back guarantee. If you don't notice the difference, okay? The people that I recommend this to, they stay on them because they notice the difference. So remember, try and find these from a local farmer if you can, or a farmer's market, or a store that sells farmer's market food. But if you can't, then look into supplements. And the best supplements, you can look into all kinds of supplements. But again, remember, if you're getting a soy product, likely you're getting a genetically modified soy product. There's lots of products that also have corn in them. You're getting a genetically modified product if it has corn in there. You absolutely are not getting genetically modified products. They go over and above to guarantee that these are not genetically modified seeds that they begin with. All right, and now here we've got 20 cancer-fighting foods as well. So 20 cancer-fighting foods include things like, again, we always see green foods up there. So again, I'm going to recommend the alfalfa. So cabbage, broccoli, kale, asparagus, chard, and is that it? We also see ginger, which is great for cancer-fighting foods, for cancer. Remember, these are not they are not going to help reduce your cancer. They don't treat cancer, but they do help you resist cancer is what it does. Green tea and turmeric are on there again. Flaxseed is on there again. Avocados, I love avocados. And also things like strawberries, tomatoes, and lentils. What are some of the cancer-fighting Shaklee products that we have? Really, I find a major difference when I take the very first product I have on there, and that is Shaklee's Vivix. Shaklee's Vivix has resveratrol in it, and this is the important ingredient that is the antioxidant that we find in particular in the grape peel is what we find. And so what they've done is they have condensed this resveratrol in this Vivix for you at a great concentrated rate. One of the things I have also found is that the plant will produce, so this is an interesting little factoid for genetically modified organisms, and that is that the plant that produces a certain amount of resveratrol, that is this great antioxidant, actually will produce more when it has a virus. And so we are able to produce a much more potent amount of resveratrol from the one plant when it actually has a virus. So if genetic modification ends up changing it so that certain plants end up becoming resistant to viruses, we may no longer be able to get the benefit that that plant produces because of fill in the blank. So this genetic modification, again, what it can do is not only maybe less often change the genetic makeup, but enhance it or repress or suppress the activities of certain genes, and we don't know the implications of that. Vitamin D on there for cancer, we know that is directly related to avoiding cancer. So again, not a treatment if you have it, but in protecting ourselves, vitamin D goes a long way. Alfalfa, again, for its high levels of vitamin K that we know are in different green plants, and also that vitamin K helps us to be able to absorb our vitamin D as well. So that's another good reason to take alfalfa. It will definitely help us absorb our vitamin D. And then finally there I have, I couldn't see what it was. A regular health routine. Because if you have a regular health routine that includes something in the wintertime around 4,000 or 5,000 international units of vitamin D, if you're making sure that in particular in the wintertime, you've got about 1,500 what is it, 1,500 grams, I think it is. No, it wouldn't be grams. Milligrams. 1,500 milligrams is what it is. 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C per day, especially in the wintertime. And in the summertime, think more and more about getting outside for your exercise as well. That is part of a healthy routine as well. I talked last week, it was about changing your weight, right, with exercise, which also decreases depression, it decreases anxiety, and increases cognitive functioning as well. So get with a good health routine, and that will help you alleviate a lot of the anxiety around that surrounding all of these questions that we not only have about COVID virus, but many of these questions that we had about food and our health before all of our concentration was detoured to this virus. There is a picture of my resources that I have, so you can take a look at some of the resources. I'll be getting up more resources, and those will be in my edited version, so you'll be able to link on those. I want to have you take a look at the agenda and remind you what we have upcoming then on our agenda. So tomorrow I am starting my healthy cleanse. And so today what I am doing, or tomorrow morning, I'm not sure, I will be getting my list of groceries. And so here is your shopping list. Make sure that you take a look at this and use your shopping list to help you with your healthy cleanse. Now, you may not be starting with me tomorrow, and that's perfectly fine if you're not. But know that there are all kinds of resources that are available on my website to be able to do this anytime that you want. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you go to my website, click on Shop Shackley, click on Shop, and then you can search for any kind of product that you're looking for. So search for the 7-Day Cleanse, search for the turmeric, search for the alfalfa. There's all kinds of really great products, but remember, because I'm an independent distributor, you need to go to my website, which is a personal website, and it can't be found on the World Wide Web. It's a PWS, it's not a www. All right, and so so make sure that you're looking for my website. The easiest way to get there is through the healthy www.healthymindbodyspirit.net, and then click on Shop Shackley, and then shop to go into all the products that you want. Yeah, that's it. That's all that I have. So that wasn't too bad, folks. This is Dr. Annette Feravich with Healthy Mind, Body, Spirit. Thank you for joining me if you did join me. And look for this edited version, which is going to have a little clip on the end, but basically good to go, just about. Yeah, and then look for next Sunday, I'm going to be talking about sugar and insulin resistance. So I found out a lot more as I've been traveling through looking at all of these different topics that I'm going to be talking about between weight loss, weight gain, and vitamin D, and also what's different in our food. I found out a lot of information about sugar, and we know a lot about insulin resistance, although Do we really know what it is, right? And let's have a better understanding about what we can do and also the consequences of insulin resistance if we don't do anything, all right? One more time, I'm going to look at that agenda. And February 6th, we've got supplements versus medicine, and we're going to also talk about how that affects your immune system. On February 13th, thyroid, adrenal glands, and stress. February 20th, because we're talking about health, we're going to get clean and talk about some of the reductions that we've had in viruses and diseases because we've looked at different ways for us to stay sanitized, right? And then we're going to start on February 27th with a healthy mind. Again, this is Dr. Annette Feravich with Healthy Mind, Body, Spirit. Thank you for joining me. I hope that you start your healthy cleanse with me. If you have any questions, comments, or concern, Dr. Dr. Feravich, F as in Frank, E-R-A, V as in Victor, I-C-H, at healthymindbodyspirit.net, and you can always email me your questions or concerns. Thank you for joining me, and have a great week.